Okay, so awesome. We are going deeper into chapter 4 now, and we're now in section 4.2 in chapter 4. So you just learned about T accounts and how to set up T accounts, and we know that there's a left side and a right side to T accounts, and we know that assets are often recorded on the left, or are always recorded on the left side for the opening balances, and then liabilities and owner's equity are recorded on the right side. So we've learned that right equals left. But we're going to give left and right new names. So in accounting, and this is probably the most fundamental accounting lesson that you're going to have this year. So left is going to be debit. So the left side of the account is called debit, and the right side of the account, oh, I'm getting better at this, aren't I? Is called credit. Okay, so debit and credit. And the only thing that debit means is left, and the only thing that credit means is right. It doesn't mean anything else. So if I say debit, it means left, and if I say credit, it means right. So assets opening balance is on the debit side of the T account, and the short form for debit is DR. So we can write DR for debit. Liabilities, the opening balance is on the right side or the credit side, and credit's short form is CR. And that is also the same for owner's equity. So credit is the opening balance for owner's equity as well. So we now know that because left, which is assets, equals right, which is liabilities and owner's equity, follows the accounting equation, or fundamental accounting equation. Assets equals liabilities plus owner's equity. Therefore, total debits equal total credits. Left equals right. So debits and credits are new terms for you, but the only thing they mean are left and right. So this theory, just like I mentioned, debits or DR or capital D, capital R, is associated with the left side of the account. That's the only thing it means. Every transaction must have a debit, and every transaction must have a credit. So that's very important. Every transaction must have a debit, and every transaction must have a credit, and the debits and credits must equal. Credit means, and credit, it can be CR or capital C, capital R, and that's associated with the right side of the account. So this is called the double entry system of accounting, because every transaction has a debit and every transaction has a credit. And we're going to now, every transaction that we do in accounting now, debits are going to equal credits. So if the debits and the credits equal, then the accounting transaction is balanced, and it will ensure that our fundamental accounting equation is still balanced. If our debits do not equal our credits, we've made a mistake, and we need to go back and fix it. So this is a chart. I'm going to turn me off so you don't have to look at me anymore. This is a chart you need to memorize. This is a chart that for the next couple of lessons and anytime you're working on assignments, you should have this chart right in front of you. And at the top of every single quiz or test, I want you to write this chart. So when you're writing a quiz, and if we're even doing it on the computer, I'll let you bring in scrap paper and you can write this down. I want you to memorize it. So this is important. For assets, the beginning value is always a debit. Okay, the opening value of assets is always a debit. And when we want to increase, when we want to increase the account, we're going to debit the asset account. And when we want to decrease the account, we're going to credit the asset account. For liabilities and owner's equity, it is opposite. So the opening balance for liabilities and owner's equity, which we already learned, is that it has a credit balance. And when we want to increase our liabilities or our owner's equity, when we owe more money or we invest more money or we make a sale in owner's equity, we are going to credit those accounts. And when we want to decrease our liability, when we've paid off some of our debt, we are going to debit the account. And with owner's equity, when we incur an expense, we are going to debit the owner's equity account. So again, debit equals left and credit equals right. Please memorize this chart. That's all I ask of you. So now I'd like you to pull up some sheets that I've given you. Okay, and so today you've gone home with these 2 sheets. Okay, and I think I'm gonna have to move this over, I think. What? Oh, my bad. So I'm gonna have to move this over a little bit because you can't see it. So let me just try that again. I'm gonna see if I can move it over a bit. No, that's not gonna work. Hold on. Just bear with me here a second. I'm sorry I'm wasting your time here, but I'm just gonna bring these over a bit so you can see them. Because they don't fit in the thing. But you've got them in front of you, so I know that you can see them, but I just want to make sure that you can see them as I'm working through them as well. So you have this chart, and this chart is what's going to help us. So we're going to follow these steps. So step 1 in the chart, in column A, we're going to write down the account names of the transaction, or what accounts are affected by the transaction. And you already know how to do this because you did this in those equation analysis sheets in chapter 3. Step 2, step 2, we're going to take step 2, we're going to write down whether these accounts is an asset or a liability or an owner's equity account. Step 3, in column C, we're going to decide if they're an increase or a decrease to those accounts. Column D, we're going to tell it whether it's a debit or a credit, and you're going to use that chart that I told you to memorize. And then column E, write down the amount where the accounts have increased or decreased. So let's go through these transactions. So I'm going to bring these up, and we're going to go through each one. So the first transaction, I'm going to give some space here to them so that's easier to see. For the first transaction, the company purchases $200 worth of supplies from BAF3M products to be paid at a later date. So we first have to decide what accounts are changing. So the first account that is changing here is that we have purchased some supplies. So hold on, I want to pay review. I want to, is it going to give me my pen? Of course. So I don't know. So the first account that's going to change, I'm going to type them in, is supplies. Okay, and supplies we know is an asset account. Hopefully you're filling this out as I'm doing it. And what's happening to supplies? Well, we bought some supplies, which means that we're going to be increasing. Okay, and you just write plus sign there. It's going to be increasing. And we know from our chart, which is over here, that an asset increases on the debit side. So we're going to go back here, and we're going to increase our asset. We're going to debit our asset for the amount of $200. The next account in this first transaction that changes is that they're paying for these products at a later date, which means our accounts payable for BAF3M, which is a liability account, is also going to be increasing, and we know that liabilities increase on the credit side. So we're going to credit our accounts payable for $200. And there we go. Our credits equal our debits. I'm going to skip a line, and I would like you to skip a line as well, and we're going to do transaction number 2. So the company pays $500 to Dini Brothers in partial payment of the amount owed to them. The company receives $200 cash from R. Van Loon in partial payment of her debt. So what accounts are affected with this transaction? Well, the company pays $500 to Dini Brothers in partial payment of the amount owed to them. So Dini Brothers must be in accounts payable. So we know that accounts payable, Dini Brothers, is impacted. We know that's a liability account. We're paying them back, which means that we now owe them less. So this is going to be a decrease to our liability, and we know that liabilities decrease on the debit side. So see right here, the debit side. So we go back to here, and we're going to write here debit. And we're going to debit that account for $500. The other account that's affected, we've paid them, which means that our other account that's affected is cash. Cash is an asset. This asset is going down because we're paying them, so our cash is going to go down. And cash decreases on the credit side. And if you look at your chart, you'll know that that's true. And we're going to credit it for $500. Good, so that's the second transaction that was done. So we're moving on to the third transaction. So the third transaction, it says that the company receives $200 cash from R. Van Loon in partial payment of her debt. So R. Van Loon must be in accounts receivable. So we know that if we're going to receive cash, cash is going to increase or be affected. It's an asset account. It's going to increase, which is a debit. Check your chart, make sure that I'm right, and it's $200. Okay. The next account that is affected is the accounts receivable for R. Van Loon. Okay, and that's an accounts receivable account. Sorry, that's also an asset account. It is decreasing because they owe us less money now. We know that assets decrease on the credit side. Okay, check your chart, make sure that I'm right. Scroll up. We're going to skip a line and we're going to look at transaction number 4. So transaction number 4 is a delivery service. It's provided to a customer at a price of $400. The customer pays cash at the time the service is performed. So we're going to receive cash. So cash increases. It's an asset. It increases. Cash increases. An asset increases on the debit side. In this case, it's $400. Now we're going to the other account that's affected. Anytime I perform a service, that's going to impact equity. So we're going to say that equity or capital, which I'll say capital, is impacted. It is an equity account. Equity is increasing. Equity increases on the credit side, and it's $400. Okay. I would like you to do the next 3 transactions on your own. Once you're done recording those transactions, then you're going to do one more step. So remember this sheet that you did the other day in class when you're watching your lesson, where you were setting up your T accounts. So you're now going to record your T accounts, these figures in your T account. So let's do the first one together. So I'm going to bring this back up again. So we're going to do the first one. So you said supplies is an asset. It increases on the debit side. So we're going to say that supplies, we're going to record this entry in our T accounts. And hopefully it lets me here. View, review, start inking. Okay. So hopefully it lets me record this. So this first one, supplies, is debiting $200. So I record that entry on that side for this first one. Okay. Okay, and then I do accounts payable, pack 'em. So I scroll down here, I find my accounts payable, pack 'em. Okay, and pack 'em is going to credit $200. So I get my pen and I'm going to credit, or the right side of the account, for $200. So this is my first accounting entry. Okay, that's the first transaction. So I'm going to write a little 1 beside them. The next transaction, oh, I think I'm